Okay, before we start, I want to remind those of you that weren't in the room that next week,
Hello.
next week both Janice and I are gone. So, huh? It's just creating all sorts of fun.
Got a music problem and everything.
So John is going to come in and lead class next week.
Well, who will be teaching?
John.
John Showery?
Our teacher. Yes, yeah. He's going to give an overview of 1 Samuel because we're going to go into 1 Samuel after this. So, you know, when he's come in top of 4, he's gotten like one verse. This time this time just do an overview, just intro overview thing.
Where's Bonnie?
Huh?
Wanda's out of town.
Wanda's out of
I know, but I'm sitting in her place.
Where's Wanda's? You're sitting in Wanda's.
Yeah, she'll be gone for 2 weeks. So.
Yeah, and then for the music, they're going to do guitars next week. They've been practicing, and I'm kind of envious. I'd like to hear it.
Yeah.
Because they've been working. They say it sounds pretty good. I haven't heard it, but
Good.
so it'll be an interesting week next week. Think you all appreciate us.
Yeah.
David's brother had died a couple months ago, and so they're finally having a memorial celebration. I wouldn't call it a service because yeah. And David's going to talk at it, and all the cousins and everything will be there. It'll be a great family time. So, and we know where his brother is, so it is a celebration.
Oh, good.
And so where are you going?
We're going down to Highland.
Highland?
Yeah,
Used to live in Highland.
yeah.
You did? Oh, you did.
And then on Sunday, we'll be heading back Sunday, but we're going to stop at my son's church. He's preaching that week, so
In California.
in California.
Oh, nice.
So, yep.
What
So,
city is he in?
huh?
Is that
He
the
is.
son that visited here at one point?
He has visited here.
Janice, where are you going then?
I'm going to Fort Collins.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yep.
2 weeks.
Okay.
Not
So,
coming home for Sunday.
so for those of you that watch online, there won't be anything online next week. So, okay, we're going to finish up the book of Ruth, and it probably won't take the whole time. And I thought, well, what can we do the rest of the time? So I'll probably do an intro to Psalms, because as we go through 1 Samuel, we're going to start hitting some of the Psalms. So I thought, well, let's do an intro to Psalms too. So, okay, so we're in Ruth. Ruth 4. So Boaz has said, I will marry you, but there is a relative that's closer. We need to allow him the chance of becoming the kinsman redeemer. So we're at that cliffhanger. Is the other guy going to accept, or is he not going to accept? So, Bonnie, I'm going to start with you, verse 1 and 2.
In what chapter?
4.
4, okay. And it's at the beginning. Yeah. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you. So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses.
Okay, so here's another example of business being conducted at the city gates. It's where the esteemed and honorable men of the city would sit and sit in judgment of city issues. It was kind of a combo city council chamber and a courtroom. So, as Boaz is there, just by chance, this other kinsman redeemer comes by. What a coincidence! Which there aren't any in the Bible. And Boaz says, come here, friend, and sit down. I want to talk to you. When it says anything about, in Hebrew they use the idiom here, I want to uncover your ear. Meaning I want to talk to you. And I want you to listen. And you will not see the name of this guy. because he isn't worthy of the honor of having his name in Scripture. In fact, the idea of turn aside friend is turn aside hidden one. Mr. So-and-so, Mr. No Name. No honor to this guy at all
Is that because of what he did?
because of what he's going to do.
Going to do.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting that as he's sitting there, he calls over 10 elders to come sit down. What do you think that kinsman redeemer is thinking? You know, I thought we were going to have a conversation. Now you're bringing the legal guys into it. So let's see what happens next. Verse 3 through, let me make sure, 4. That's a long verse 4.
Then he said to the kinsman redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I would bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, he said.
Ooh, more suspense. Ooh, he's going to redeem it. And if he redeems it, that means he gets Ruth too. But he didn't hear about Ruth yet. So he tells the guy that Naomi, our relative, is selling the land that had belonged to her husband. So the other guy, being the closest kinsman redeemer, has the first right to redeem the land. And he's thinking, wait, well, this is the first time we've heard of the land too. There's land. Why didn't she sell it earlier? I mean, they're living in poverty. Why didn't she sell the land? Land is so important to keep in the family. And Boaz is saying you need to keep this land in the family. And if you don't buy it, I'll buy it. So imagine this guy's eyes getting wide. Land, 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 land. Land is their life. The more land, the better. Anyone would have been interested. Land, I can get more land.
Can I just put in a little word? I'm not
Of course.
for this, but I grew up on a farm,
Mm-hmm.
and when anybody in the area was going to sell their farm, they went around to the neighbors first. And
Yeah.
before they put up any kind of a sign or anything on their land,
Yeah,
they would go see if any of the neighbors wanted to buy it.
yeah.
But
In
in
fact,
the
my dad
friends.
thought it was like
Yeah.
that. You know, I remember his coming home that day and saying, well, we've increased the size of the farm, I bought the land.
Yeah.
So that was, I didn't
Yeah.
really realize
And
that was a
that's
difficult
nice that they
thing.
do that. Yeah. So it's the same kind of idea, only family. Keep it in the family. And he says, yes, I'll buy it. I wonder how long he had to think about it. Like
Yeah.
seconds. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy this land. Notice how many times Boaz says redeem here. In Hebrew, it's actually 5 times in one sentence. He really wants to drive that redeem thing into them, into this kinsman redeemer.
But he still has to buy it, even though he's...
Yeah, he has to pay money for it. He has to redeem it, but he gets first choice, a chance to redeem it. And again, it was probably prime land. Anything around Bethlehem would have been. So getting more land meant more wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to wonder if Ruth and Naomi are there. It doesn't say. And if they're there, what are they thinking? Because if they know this guy says yes, that's who Ruth is going to have to marry. But so Boaz has another shoe to drop in verse 5. Vicki,
I can't see.
okay,
it on
okay,
this.
that's fine. Dottie, no glasses. Dottie, Mickey, yeah. Oh,
And
Vicky.
Boaz said,
I'm sorry.
Until you buy the land from Naomi, he will also require Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased man, to perpetuate the man's name on his property. The Redeemer replied, I can't
Oh.
redeem. Oh,
That's another verse.
Is it?
So sorry. Okay, so Boaz says, oh, by the way, there's a woman involved, and you'd have to marry her, and she's a foreigner, because he points out Ruth the Moabitess.
I don't think that was fair. That all should have been up front.
It should have been that. Like, why lead this guy on? Get him all excited. And
Yeah.
it's a package deal. You can't be a half kinsman redeemer. You're all or nothing. So you get the land, you get the woman. So now the guy really has to think. Thinks twice about it, because he hasn't signed anything. He's just said, "Yeah, I want to buy it." Well, now, strings attached. Now verse 6. Now, Dottie, I'm thinking.
The Redeemer replied, I can't redeem it myself, or I will ruin my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption because I can't redeem it.
Okay, so he says, whoa, wait a minute. I can't do that. I can't take the woman. So how would it affect his inheritance? If he married Ruth, his first son would be considered Elimelech's son and would inherit the land. So this other kinsman redeemer would just be like the caretaker of the land till the son grew old enough to take the land for himself.
His own son.
His own son would be considered the son of Elimelech. That's the whole purpose of marrying the widow, so that it carries on the name of Elimelech. Well, it's actually Elimelech's, I forgot which one she married. Elimelech's son that Ruth had married, they would carry on his name, which would carry on Elimelech's name. They were all about carrying on the family name.
Even if it was a woman, to the point where she'd get married again. I guess.
They wanted sons, but if all they had were daughters. So
Just have to do.
if this man already had sons, that would mean, and the son would also inherit from his natural born dad. So if this guy already had sons, that means he'd have to divide their inheritance by another kid. And if he had no other sons, then everything would go to this one son who was not considered his son. It was Chilion, or I forgot which.
Malon?
Chilion or Malon. I think she was.
Malhon.
Yeah. So it'd be considered his son of Elimelech. Yeah. The child would not carry his natural father's name. He would carry the name of Malon or Chilion. And imagine if he was already married, what his old wife would think. Because you're dividing her son's inheritances too, and you're bringing another woman into the house, which was a common thing anyway. But he's just, and then she's a Moabitess. Both Chilion and Malon had married Moabite women, and look where they are now. They're dead. He might have been thinking, oh, there's a curse if you marry a Moabite. I don't want to be dead. So lots of reasons. And when he says, I can't, he means I won't. Because he could. That's why he's recorded as Mr. So-and-so for eternity. No name at all. He says, Boaz, you go ahead and take the land and the widow. I'm bowing out. He wanted the land, but not the woman. But Boaz wanted the woman and got the land.
Win-win.
Yeah. So again, we don't know, but imagine if Ruth and Naomi are there, where their hearts are now. up and down and up and down. But now Ruth is going to marry Boaz, who she wanted to marry. She would have been willing to marry the other guy, but she wanted to marry Boaz. Verse 7 and 8. One of you two.
Now this was custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself," he drew off the sandal.
Okay, so back in Deuteronomy 25, if they followed Deuteronomy 25, the way this should have happened is Ruth should have been taking the sandal off this guy and should have spit in his face. That's what it says to do in Deuteronomy. But we're only seeing the sandal part of the ceremony, and he takes off his own sandal. So it's obviously evolved. Besides, Ruth is probably pretty relieved. She probably doesn't feel like spitting in this guy's face at all. So taking off the sandal, it most likely symbolizes that when you get new land, you are expected to walk around the land and establish your borders. Well, now he's saying, I will not be walking on that land. Here, have my shoe. You walk on the land. So Boaz gets the land, which will technically belong to Ruth's son. You know, it's the whole same situation. And then Mr. So-and-so walks out of the story and out of history. We are done with Mr. So-and-so. Never see him again. Verse 9 and 10.
And Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Amalek's, and all that was Shilon's and Maon's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife to perpetrate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses today."
Okay, so Boaz is crossing his T's and dotting his I's. He's joyfully proclaiming what's happened, and he's legally sealing the transaction. Now, in the law of Moses, only 2 witnesses are required. But how many witnesses does he have?
10.
He's got 10. So much better. No one can refute this. This number 10 later becomes the number of witnesses required at a Jewish marriage benediction or a quorum for a synagogue meeting. For an official prayer meeting today in modern Judaism, you have to have 10 men. So 10 men become an important number for witnessing. And so Boaz doesn't forget the responsibility of carrying on the line of Elimelech. He knows his son is going to be carrying on that line. And here's the first time that we hear which son Ruth was married to. She was married to Mahlon, the sick one. Remember, one was puny, one was sick. He's the sick one, not the puny one, Chilion. So in chapter 1, Ruth came to Bethlehem thinking she was never going to be married again. But because she gave her heart and her life to God, God rewarded her beyond her wildest expectations. She is marrying the bachelor of the year. Well, the century for them. Verse 11 and 12. Betty, are you?
Oh, we're in 3.
4.
Oh, 4.
11 and 12.
11 and 12. Okay. And I did it because I was looking at the wrong page. All the people who were in the court and the elders said, "We are witnesses may the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel. And may you achieve wealth in Ephrath and become famous in Bethlehem. Just keep going.
12.
Moreover, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman.
Okay, so everyone confirms this commitment. Do you think there might have been cheering and stuff? I mean, everybody loves a good love story, and this is it's love. Love won out. They're blessed with a wish that they be like Rachel and Leah. Why? Because Rachel and Leah had a lot of kids between them. When they say Rachel and Leah, they're including the servants. So there's 13 kids in there. So may you be a fruitful house and have lots of kids.
They call it the founding mother, Rachel and
Yeah. And again, we see Bethlehem and we see Ephrathah.
Oh, it's not.
It's just a way to identify that, a different way to identify Bethlehem. Ephrathah was the former name of Bethlehem. So, okay, easy to see why Rachel and Leah, but why Perez? Perez was born of a relationship that shouldn't have happened. He was born to Tamar. Tamar had been in the same situation as Ruth. Her husband had died, and her husband had younger brothers, and so she was expecting to marry one of the younger brothers Dad never got her together with one of the younger brothers, so she tricked her father-in-law. I can't remember which one. I can't remember which brother. One of the 12. Judah. Yeah, tricked Judah into sleeping with her, and they had a son. They had twins. Perez was one of the twins. When it was time for them to be born, Perez had stuck his fist out of the womb, and the nurse tied a scarlet thread around to make sure they knew which one was the firstborn. Then he pulled his wrist back in. And the other twin came out first. But still Perez was considered the firstborn. So why him? It's because, a couple reasons. Because it was a fulfillment of a kinsman redeemer situation, even though it wasn't the right kinsman redeemer, still that kind of situation. And then Perez was the ancestor of the Bethlehemites, so the people that lived in there. So that's why him. Okay, verse 13 says, So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went in to her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. So they have a son. Again, it is considered Mahlon's son of Abimelech. So he carries on Abimelech's name. Abimelech's line is continued. Yay, that's another great part of the story. Now, she had been married to Mahlon 10 years and hadn't had a kid. Then, presumably pretty quickly, she gets pregnant. That's a God thing. God had apparently closed her womb and opened it when he wanted it opened. The Lord made her able to conceive a child. Okay, verse 14 through 16.
Then the women of the town said to Naomi, Praise the Lord, who has now provided a redeemer for your family. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age. For he is the son of your daughter-in-law who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons. Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast, and she cared for him as if he were her own.
So Naomi, the bitter woman, is receiving blessings from the women of Bethlehem. No longer bitter. She is taken care of for life. She has a grandson. That guarantees she's taken care of. So in their blessing, the women remind Naomi that she's had a blessing all this time. Ruth. And they say she's better than 7 sons. That is huge. Because sons were what it was all about. But she is better than 7 sons. She sacrificed so much for her mother-in-law.
You know, that's the first time I don't remember ever reading about the word nanny in the Old Testament.
Yeah, yours says nanny?
Huh?
Yours says nanny? Or,
Yeah, nanny.
yeah, mine says nurse.
That's what I always thought it was, nurse, you know?
It's just a different translation of the same word. She was obviously too old to be his nursemaid, who would breastfeed a grandchild, but so she kind of became his caretaker.
And that name still exists today.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what the Hebrew word is, though, for that they used. And everyone recognizes God's hand in this. So, Naomi has someone that's obligated to take care of her. Although this grandson, although there is no way Boaz would not take care of her too. But now, the grandson is obligated. It is his responsibility. When they pray that this grandson's name becomes famous in Israel, it does, because he is the ancestor of David and the ancestor of the Messiah. His name's even in the New Testament. So this book begins with Naomi and ends with Naomi. She goes from bitter to blessed. While she was in that bitter state, if she just had any idea what God was going to do, how her life might have been for the better, her attitude. So by laying the baby on her lap or on her breast, is showing that she loves this grandchild and she becomes not just his Grammy, but his nanny. And she takes care of him. Verse 17 through 22. That's the end of the book.
The women living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. This then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David.
So this family line shows that this must have been written at the time of David. Because how could they include David if he wasn't
Born yet.
around yet? So the women name Obed. The only time we see women that aren't the mother or the grandmother naming the baby. We don't know why. We don't know, why did Boaz allow this? Josephus, a historian that was around during the time of Christ, he says Naomi did name him, but that's not what it says. So, the family line. Perez, he was the son of Tamar and Judah. Hezron, he was from the family of Jacob that went to Egypt. Amminadab is the father of Aaron. So they come from that line. Nahshon was the head of the house of Judah. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Something really interesting. Remember who Salmon married? He married Rahab.
Mm.
And then they had Boaz. If they didn't skip any generations in there, that means Ruth's mother-in-law is Rahab. But it seems there's some generation, got to be some generations in there, because that would make Rahab really, really old at that point. But my son and I were figuring some things, and yeah, it's possible she just would have been really old at that point. But I thought that's really interesting. Got 2 foreign women
In the line.
in the line, but that close together, that closely related. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Her other mother-in-law. Now she has 2 mother-in-laws. Who wants 2 mother-in-laws?
Can you repeat that again? Salmon.
Salmon
Rahab,
married Rahab.
who bore
It says Salmon fathered Boaz,
Boaz.
who is Ruth's husband.
Boaz.
Yeah,
I wrote it wrong. I thought I did.
yeah. But one thing about Hebrew genealogies, they're not really always that great at including every generation. So it's possible there could be someone in between there. So then Obed, the father of Jesse, who is the father of David, and eventually from this line, Jesus. So remember who Obed's legal father is?
Malon.
Malon. But in here, we're getting Boaz. Why? Shouldn't it be Malon? Obed would have been eligible to inherit from both Malon and Boaz. The Israelites considered him a son of both. Naturally, he was Boaz's son, but legally, he was Boaz and Malon's son. So, biologically, they're going the biological line. And again, because they're related, that line would have met farther back anyway. So Obed and Ruth and Naomi and Boaz, they're all living in Bethlehem. And David will be descended from them, and the Messiah will be descended from them. And that's why when they do the census in the New Testament, Joseph and Mary have to go back to Bethlehem. It's all their fault. Yeah, that's where their family land is. And so God set it up so that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem, which the Bible prophesies. So he's working his plan back then. We don't hear about the Messiah directly in Ruth, but he's pictured. The kinsman redeemer has to be a family member. Jesus is our kinsman redeemer. We are his family. He had to become human so that he could become our kinsman redeemer and save us. The kinsman redeemer had the duty of buying family members out of slavery. Jesus bought us out of slavery. The kinsman redeemer had the duty of buying back land that had been forfeited. Jesus will redeem the earth that had been sold over to Satan. Boaz, the kinsman redeemer to Ruth, was not motivated by self-interest, but motivated by love of Ruth. Jesus' motivation for redeeming us is love. Boaz, the kinsman redeemer to Ruth, had to have a plan to redeem Ruth. And some people would have thought his plan was foolish. Jesus had a plan to redeem us. And some people might think his plan was foolish. Yeah, both plans work in a glorious way. Boaz, as the kinsman redeemer, took Ruth as his bride. The people Jesus took as his bride is his church. Boaz, as a kinsman redeemer to Ruth, he provided a glorious destiny for Ruth. Jesus is our redeemer. He's providing a glorious destiny for us. So we don't see the Messiah named in here, but we see all about him in that kinsman redeemer. It all comes back to the idea of Jesus as our kinsman redeemer. Whole reason he became a man. The only one qualified to be our kinsman redeemer. And he had to be perfect. There was no other kinsman redeemer waiting in the wings. Now, one big difference, a huge difference. Boaz redeemed Ruth, according to Ruth 3:11, because she was virtuous and worthy. Jesus redeems us despite the fact that we are not virtuous or worthy. So that's the one big difference. So that's the end of the love story, best love story in the Bible. So, again, as we get into 1 Samuel and the next several books, we're going to be hitting Psalms. When we get into the story of David, we're going to hit a lot of Psalms, but they're going to be interspersed in here. So let's talk about Psalms a little. I'll bring up this other document. Okay. Psalms is the third longest book in the Bible. There's 150 Psalms. The largest book in the Bible is Jeremiah, and the second longest is Genesis, and then comes Psalms, as far as verses. The Psalms were composed over about 1,000-year period. Jesus Christ quotes from the book of Psalms more than any other part of the New Testament. Nearly half of all the direct quotes taken from the Old Testament and quoted in the New Testament come from Psalms. In the book of Revelation, Psalms is quoted or alluded to 103 times.
Let's say that again.
In the book of Revelation, Psalms is quoted or alluded to at least 103 times. Yeah. And 149 times in the Gospels. So it's quoted a lot. Jesus started and concluded his earthly ministry by quoting Psalms. In John 2:17, he quotes Psalm 69. And in Luke 23:46, he quotes Psalm 31:5. Now, David wrote most of the Psalms, at least 75 of them. 73 of them have his name on them, and there's other things that show evidence he wrote 2 more. So he wrote 75 of them, but there's 150, so there's plenty he didn't write. There's at least 6 other authors. Moses, King Solomon, Asaph, and the sons of Korah, and Ethan the Ezrahite. 15 of the Psalms are called a song of ascents. So they are songs that Jewish pilgrims sang as they were going to Jerusalem, and because Jerusalem was uphill, you were ascending. So they sang these songs while they were going up the hill. The key word in Psalms is praise. It appears 211 times. Psalm 88 is the only psalm that ends without some kind of praise of God. Every other psalm ends with a praise of God. We'll see the word Selah in there 71 times. the word technically means forever, but it's gives the idea of stop and pause and think about what you just read, or in their case, sang. Because this was a songbook. This was their hymnal. They sang these as songs for their services. So much easier to memorize songs than it is to memorize verses. During the Passover, it was customary to recite Psalm 136 and Psalms 113 to 118. Jesus probably recited these at the Last Supper. Psalm 90 is the oldest one. We studied Psalm 90 back when, during Moses' life. Moses wrote it about 1450 BC. And then about 1,000 years later, the last of the Psalms was added. Psalm 117 is the shortest chapter it's the shortest psalm, only has 2 verses. Shortest chapter of the Bible too, 2 verses. Well, if you've ever read 119, you know that is that's the longest chapter. Now, depending on what kind of Bible you're reading and what kind of extra notes you are, Psalm 117 or 18, or in Bible without all the extra stuff, or 21 and 21 in the Catholic Bible, is the middle of the Bible.
What was the middle?
In anything but a Catholic Bible, 117 or 118. So if you don't have a lot of notes, appendixes and things, that you should just open your Bible in the middle, and there's Psalm 117 and 118. The psalm most people know by heart. Do you have any guesses? 23. Yeah. So the Psalms are actually split into 5 books. You got Psalms 1 through 41, which they say corresponds to Genesis. Psalms 42, book 2, 42 is to 72, corresponds to Exodus. Book 3 is 73 to 89, corresponds to Leviticus. I'm not sure how it corresponds. Book 4 is Psalm 90 to 106, corresponds to Numbers, and Psalm 107 to 150 corresponds to Deuteronomy. I'll have to figure out why they think that corresponds. Let me see what other notes I had. Why did I close that? It's part of the Hebrew Old Testament that's considered writings. The Psalms are in one of 3 kind of forms. You got your praise Psalms, usually starting with something as an order, praise the Lord or sing unto the Lord. You can probably think of Psalms that are like that. You got the lament Psalms, which they start with something like, "Oh Lord, how long?" We heard that last week. How long, oh Lord? That was a lament psalm. Then you got the wisdom Psalms, how to live a good, happy life. So Psalms fit into one of those 3s. We don't know what the tune for any of these songs were, but again, it helped them remember. Think about, finish this, Flintstones, Meet the Flintstones. They're, what goes after that?
Stone Age family.
Modern Stone Age family. We all know that. Maybe not Amber, because she didn't. That was our generation.
I know that one from the Vegas live action.
Yeah. So when they started a psalm, someone started singing the psalm, everybody could join in because they knew it that well. They only had to know 150 songs. I mean, how many hymns do we know?
That's like in the book I'm reading about Grace Livingston Hill. They go to church and there's people all over, but they're all singing a different melody.
Yeah.
When they go to church, and her name is Margaret, and her eyes are open wide. She's the daughter of a minister from New York, and she moved to Arizona back in the 1900s to be a school teacher, and she goes to this church the first time, and she hears all this, and she has a beautiful voice, and she hears all this different voices coming at her. Her eyes are open wide.
Yeah. So as with these Psalms, as with any of the other Hebrew poetry we've run into, the idea is not about rhyming. Not at all. It's about rhyming of ideas. In one of two ways. Sometimes it's two similar ideas next to each other, like in Psalm 105:23, Israel came into Egypt and Jacob dwelt in the land of Ham. Both mean the same exact thing, just a different way of saying the same thing. Sometimes it's two contrasting ideas next to each other, like in Psalm 90, verse 6. In the morning it flourishes and grows up. In the evening it cut down and withers. Morning is contrasted with evening. So that's how Hebrew poetry works. Two verses either agreeing with each other or contrasting each other. So as you go through Psalms, you gotta look for that kind of thing. I think that's all the notes I have, and I think we are going to be done super early. So let me shut this off.